I'm going to talk to you. I said I would give John a short title, wikitree.com and DNA. And then I was thinking, why do people need Wikitree? So I said the real purpose of this talk is to convince you why you and the big DNA companies need to join wikitree.com and adopt its honor code principles, which are accuracy, free and open collaboration, courtesy, trust, and understanding. Accuracy is one thing that we're not used to from the big genealogy websites. I have put together some notes on my own website. I put a link on my Facebook page. You don't need to take your own notes unless I veer off script, as I tend to do, and say something interesting. So all you really need to know is pwaldron.info/IGRS/2024. It's case sensitive. The IGRS has to be in capitals, as I discovered when I sent John the link with lowercase letters and it didn't work. Can you read this down the back, or do you want me to increase the font size? No, Martin can read it anyway.
I was at the back earlier and I couldn't read it.
That better. So my summary before I started to put this together was to point out genetic genealogy involves two things: comparing DNA and comparing family trees. I'm trying to match up your DNA with your match's DNA and your family tree with your match's DNA. And as you heard from Claire before lunch, we have many websites designed to assist in each task, but a few designed to do both tasks well simultaneously. They all have advantages, they all have disadvantages. And I hope to convince you and persuade you to convince others and persuade you to convince the DNA companies that the philosophy behind Wikitree, properly used, means its advantages outweigh the disadvantages. I started out with desktop genealogy software. It's called Personal Ancestral File back in 1987 when I started. I thought it was wonderful. Back in those days, broadband probably hadn't been heard of. Broadband came in and it was very slow. I have lots of nice keyboard shortcuts that make data entry very fast. I control my own backups. I do not trust any multinational company to back up my data. I had a Vodafone email address before Vodafone.ie went out of business. Luckily, I backed up all my emails. I still have them, but many of their users lost them. Ancestry.com is notorious for buying up the competition and closing it down and losing data. So make sure wherever you store your family history that you back it up. But my database has grown and grown and grown. 37 years since I started it, and my life expectancy has got shorter and shorter and shorter. And a bigger database takes more time to update. If I check the death notices every day, there could be 4 people in my database to have a death notice added. And someday I'll be adding my own, but you'll be adding mine. So I'm looking for some way of leaving stuff after me, but we don't know what website will last for how long. So I'm going to break this up into 5 or 6 sections. Claire has probably asked most of these questions before lunch, so I may skip some of them. I'm going to talk about the principle of a single editable, correctable world tree. I'm going to talk to you about the hard work involved when you find a new DNA match of updating the family tree on both ends. I'm going to tell you why wikitree.com is the best, and I get into the basics of how to use Wikitree, then on to the DNA-specific features of Wikitree. The further reading section shows many of the other fantastic features of Wikitree that I just don't have time to go through. I'm supposed to talk for 40 minutes, is that right?
40 minutes or so.
So I will try and keep an eye on the time here and finish up by 2:26, 25. I'll do a little bit of a straw poll like Claire did. Who here has not yet started recording their family history for posterity? One person. That's why you're here today, to learn how to do it. How many different versions of your family tree do you think you should have to maintain? Who thinks you should only have to maintain one electronic version? A lot of people. Who thinks you should have to maintain as many as there are DNA websites? It's a pain in the neck. How do you record the master copy? Which is the master copy when you have to maintain several copies? Is there anyone here still using pen and paper for their records? No, everyone's on a computer. One.
As well as.
As well as. Well, exclusively. Is there anyone here using just word processing software? Good. Who's using standalone desktop genealogy software? Good few. Who's using online databases only? A good few. I hope you have your backup strategy in place in case your favorite website decides to shut down tomorrow. I won't go through all the different websites, we really don't have time. Who uses any of the single world trees? Who's using familysearch.org to store your own family history? Nobody. Who's using genie.com? Nobody. I bet you there's nobody using werelate.org, which was probably the first of these collaborative family trees. I discovered it back in 2008, I think, and it never really took off. I know there's at least 2 wikitree.com users in the audience. Any more than 2? One other? One down the back? Not too sure. Maybe at the end of today you'll all decide to sign up. So I've said familysearch.org, genie.com, werelate.org, wikitree.com. They're all the same thing. The one single world tree. How do we end up with 4 of them? Well, it obviously means doing collaborative genealogy is popular. It gives us the opportunity to correct other people's errors rather than to make other people's errors go viral, as they do with the business model of, say, Ancestry.com, where they encourage a new user to just guess if you don't know, and then they sell those guesses on to the next wave of customers, because you're expected to donate your family tree to Ancestry with the rights to charge your DNA matches. As Claire said earlier, Ancestry have now gone from the one-off payment for DNA analysis to an ongoing subscription. And without that subscription, I don't think you can see any of your matches' family trees anymore. And do you get royalties if your matches look at your family trees and Ancestry is charging them? No, we should all go on strike and demand royalties. You have to make compromises, though, if you're using a shared tree. You don't have complete control. It's not your tree or my tree, it's our tree. Everyone descended from the same ancestor has the same rights to edit that ancestor's profile, but it reduces the workload if somebody else is doing it. It increases the accuracy if there are people correcting your mistakes for you. It may slow you down because it can be a little slower than a desktop program. All 4 of these single world trees share similar objectives, but they have their differences as well. The objective is to have a single profile for everyone who has ever lived, and if there are duplicate profiles, merge them. And if there's conflict of information, at least document the sources that lead to the conflict, or if one is completely wrong, get rid of it. There are differences. Family Search is the Mormon Church organization for genealogy, and its original purpose was to, I was going to say digitize records, but it predates digitization by many decades. Microfilming was the technology when they started collecting records around the world, and then the microfilms were turned into digital images, and the digital images are being indexed and catalogued. And part of that is to copy the primary source material into their so-called single world tree, which you may find if you look at the Irish civil birth records from the 1860s and 1870s, that they have indexed several times over. They have started adding those directly into the so-called single world tree. Each birth record generates 3 profiles in the world tree, one for the child, one for the father, one for the mother. Family of 10 generates 3 times 10, 30 profiles, one for each of the 10 children, 10 separate profiles for the father, 10 separate profiles for the mother, and somebody else has to come along and merge all those. That's not the right way to do it. Genie has already been taken over by one of the multinationals, MyHeritage, back in 2012. They got paranoid at the time of the credential stuffing attack on 23andMe and other websites last year. And they decided we're going to force all our users to change their passwords. Well, they didn't. They decided we're going to change all our users' passwords and force them to use the email address they had when they registered to get the new password. My email address that I registered with died in 2013. I had to open a new profile and create a duplicate of myself on Genie. And then they wanted to charge me to merge my new profile with my existing profile. So that's not the way to do it. Wikitree is the only one of these websites with an emphasis on DNA confirmation. This is a DNA day, so that's why I'm talking about Wikitree. Genie.com has some DNA features. Family Search doesn't. I don't think WeRelate does. But these are not the only single world trees. We have Ancestry.com and MyHeritage.com harvesting all the user-donated trees, trying to glue them all together, trying to make their own behind-the-scenes single world tree and to generate hints as to how you might be related to your DNA matches. And I'm sure most people here have seen hints that have been helpful and hints that have been wrong. Is it 90% of the hints correct? 70%?
Depends on whether it's a tree or a record.
Tree hints I'm talking about.
15%.
15?
Somewhere between. It's very hard to tell.
It's hard to tell. My hunch from my own experience is that on Ancestry about 2/3 of them are right and the other third is very wrong. I gave a similar talk. I was asked to talk to the Mayo Genealogy group last weekend, and I said, well, I'd talk if I could do a dress rehearsal for the one I promised the IGRS. And some people there said 90% of the through lines and theory of family relativity hints are wrong. But it's certainly a very significant proportion, and there is no way to submit corrections. I'll show you some examples in a minute. The next question is, why, when we find a new DNA match and find the connection, the relationship between the two matches, do both parties have to go in and edit two separate trees, maybe on each of the 6 websites? Claire told you this morning about these 6 big websites that everybody should be on. I tell people about Murphy's Law of Genetic Genealogy, which I discovered when I was helping Mrs. Murphy, the adoptee, who was on 5 of the 6 websites, and discovered eventually that she had a full brother and that he was on the only DNA website that she wasn't on. It took her an extra 2 years to find him. I hope you've all linked your pedigree chart to your own DNA kits. Just take a deep breath and swallow hard and hand as little information as necessary over to Ancestry and MyHeritage and let them resell it if they want, because it will help you. You will, while you don't gain financially from handing it over, you do gain in terms of what you learn about your relationships to your DNA matches. You will often find you have to do your own matches genealogy. Claire talked about that this morning as well, how she found a match with an unusual surname. I had one last week. I looked at her on Ancestry and couldn't figure her out because all I had was her first name and a surname, which turned out to be her husband's surname, which had nothing to do with her DNA. Then she showed up in GenMatch last week, and I said, it's an unusual surname. I looked for her on Facebook. And there she was on Facebook. Teresa was blah, now blah. So I had her maiden surname and her married surname. And the maiden surname was reasonably unusual, but it was the surname of one of our shared matches, and it turned out that they were brother and sister. So I put her family tree together, even though she has nothing on either of the DNA websites. And her ancestors are from the same townland in Mayo as my mother's ancestors, but I haven't found the link yet. So we're all frustrated by the need to keep exporting and uploading outcome files and editing multiple online family trees. The one place where I feel you have to do it manually because it's so much better than the others is Family Tree DNA, which has the concept of linked matches and will actually, when you put in your genealogical relationship to a match, it will find the DNA segments that you share with the match and the other people who triangulate on those segments. And it will say, you must be related to all these triangulated matches through the same distant ancestor through whom you're related to the person you just added to your tree. So we know that you're related through great-great-grandmother Durkin. But now we're going to throw the fish back in the river like the anglers do, and we'll put her in the maternal bucket instead of the maternal great-great-grandmother bucket. So it's not as good as it could be, but it's one of the better features of any of these family tree websites. So that's why I say we're all better off collaborating with our matches and with everyone else in this room on a single world tree. So I think I have said all that. So why is Wikitree.com the best? It has benefits and it doesn't have a lot of the drawbacks that its competitors have. I tell people who want to ask what Wikitree is, it's like Wikipedia for genealogists. I think everybody knows what Wikipedia is. I've been a Wikipedia editor, I think, since 2005. And it's the same principle. Wikipedia also has errors. Some people correct them. I have read newspaper articles where people start off by saying, Wikipedia reports this, but it's wrong. And the journalist doesn't even go into Wikipedia and correct the error. I wish they would. It's not news that Wikipedia is wrong. It's news that the journalist is too lazy to fix it if it's wrong and he has a source. It's like crowdsourced genealogy. The genealogy is provided by volunteers. The software and the website are largely developed also by volunteer programmers. And there are lots of projects for adding new apps to do neat new things with the Wikitree data. They're all listed further down in this presentation. I'll show you one or two of them maybe, but you can play around with them yourselves at home later. Wikitree has its own pedigree. It was born on the 5th of November 2008. There's an annual Wikitree Day. This is the time I showed you a Wikitree page. This is one of the many help pages on Wikitree. It's a day of online events through which you can watch through YouTube, mainly speakers, events like this one here today, but online. It has a relationship with Gedmatch.com, which has been going on for many years now. You will see on your one-to-many match lists on Gedmatch the word wiki with a hyperlink on some of your matches, and that will take you straight to the pedigree chart on Wikitree. And if that person updates the Wikitree pedigree, the match doesn't have to update a new GEDCOM file to Gedmatch. It's also connected with mitoydna.org. I won't have time to go into what that is. It is essentially a Gedmatch equivalent for Y-DNA and mitochondrial DNA. I'll show you later how to link your 23andMe kit to Wikitree. Will Wikitree die? Will it outlive you and me is the first question. Will our research outlive us? It's more likely to outlive us if it's contributed to some ongoing project than if it's sitting on a hard drive at home that's going to go in the skip when we die. Wikitree allows you to have an advance directive to say what happens to your work when you die. There are different levels of privacy of Wikitree profiles, and living people, there are stricter privacy rules, and they have to have a profile manager, and when the profile manager dies, they can't be made public if they're living people. So, as Claire said earlier, make sure with all your DNA kits that there's somebody appointed to look after them when you're gone. I'll come back to that as well later. Wikitree has two other promises. It will always be 100% free. Where does the money come from? The money comes from advertising, online advertising. But the nice thing is, once you're signed up as a contributor, you don't have to look at the ads anymore. It's only for the non-contributing users that they have to look at the ads. And the other promise is it will last forever, and there are various trusts in place to make sure it goes. It's run by a very small team of about 10 people. Chris Whitten, whose photo you see down there at the bottom right, is the founder and No, that's not Chris Whitten. That's Peter Roberts, is it? They look like each other. Anyway, Chris Whitten is the founder. And I do worry what would happen if Chris was run over by a bus in the morning. But he assures us that he has structures in place to make sure it will continue. Life would be a lot simpler for us if all the DNA comparison websites just allowed us to link to a good family tree website like Wikitree. and stop telling us to link to error-ridden family trees and encouraging us to make those errors go viral. We only want one person to have to update after each new discovery. And basically what we're doing is using a single world tree as a feedback loop to feed back information when we notice that things are not quite as they should be, could be improved, gaps could be filled in, somebody's confused two people with the same name, somebody's jumped to the conclusion that two people are parent and child where the child was born before the parent. That happens. I'll show you an example later. We're a long way from that. But Wikitree is purely a family tree website which has links to DNA kits on other websites. It's not like the DNA comparison websites that have links to pedigree charts that have to be uploaded. There are only 38,204,569 people with profiles on Wikitree earlier this week. That's tiny when you consider the population of the world today is in the billions. 33 million of those are connected to each other by blood or by marriage, maybe through many different degrees. And then there are little bits of trees that are not connected to the rest. You need patience to find all your ancestors on Wikitree, or you can just go in and add them rather than waiting for other people to add them. We all exercise patience waiting for that DNA match that we're looking for to show up. I sometimes wonder, I have a delinquent brother who disappeared many years ago, and I'm waiting for his children to show up as my nephews in my DNA matches, but it hasn't happened yet. Maybe because he hasn't had any children, or maybe because they're not in the DNA system yet. We're all listening to talk about artificial intelligence recently. I think that the DNA hint systems of the big companies are more like artificial stupidity. We want accuracy before profit. The big companies want profit before accuracy. It's like, why does the government fund third-level research? Because it wouldn't happen if it was left to the market to fund. It's the same with compiling the family tree. Wikitree is not using artificial intelligence, it's using the real intelligence of its users to learn from their and others' past mistakes and to correct the errors in the tree. AI is based on large language models, which are analyzing human language and basically writing essays for students, doing good translation work or whatever. That's what ChatGPT does. Human languages are relatively unstructured things. Genealogy databases have a much more precise structure. Our lineage linked databases. It should be easy, much easier to train a computer to put together a family tree than to train it to speak English or French. But it hasn't happened yet. Well, it's happened, but it's not working very well. So, for example, here's one of my hints for Ancestry DNA. Oops, I am doing this in a private window, so I have another copy over here in a public window. And I could type standing up. And I'll blow that up again to the same size so that you can see it. This one is logged into Ancestry, so it will go straight through to the hint. Here is my known great-great-grandfather who owned the land on which my mother was born in Griffith's Valuation in 1855. He died there in 1865. His death certificate says he was 87 years old, so he must have been born in 1777 or 1778, if his age on the death certificate is correct. Ancestry says he's probably the son of Margarita Raftery, obviously taken from a Latin parish register by somebody who doesn't even turn the accusative case back into the nominative case. And she was born in 1789, 12 years after she gave birth to her son. No, thank you very much. And it allows me to evaluate, and I have evaluated, and I think there are various different Margaret Rafteries conflated into one profile in that Ancestry hint. I cannot reject the hint. I cannot correct the hint. I just have to live with it. And 33 years after she had my ancestor James, she started having the rest of her children. Not really worth looking at, or it would take an awful lot of looking at to try and figure out, is there a nugget of truth in there? Ancestry has recently come up with an accuracy checker. And we have some very good genealogy bloggers online. This is Tamura Jones from Holland, who wrote about the Ancestry.com tree checker when it was introduced just at the back end of last year. And he said Ancestry can and should promote awareness that consistency checking isn't an optional but a fundamental feature of genealogy software. It's a fundamental feature of Wikitree. Ancestry has put its tree checker behind an additional paywall, like its DNA matches trees. So it's not interested in accuracy, it's interested in profit. There's no mechanism on Ancestry to provide feedback. Ancestry profiles have a facts tab, but they don't have a speculation tab or a research notes tab. And we all speculate and we all make research notes. And an awful lot of people do that on Ancestry and stick the speculation under facts and stick the research notes under facts, and it turns out to be wrong. Ancestry gives us hints, all lumped together. Some of these hints are primary source material about the same individual in a completely different primary source, so a census return for somebody when you're looking at a birth, marriage, or death record. Sometimes the hint is another namesake of the person in the same source. So you might be looking at a birth of John Murphy in Cork in 1869, and it'll say, here's another John Murphy in Cork in 1869. He might be the same one, or you might have confused the two. Ancestry does not tell you very well which hints are purely based on DNA, or which hints emanate from the wrong guesses of its other customers. I suspect there's an awful lot of effort to come up with hints using good logic and bad logic and very bad logic. My heritage is the same. I have 59 theories of family relativity on my heritage. 9 of them are from people who are already in my family tree on my heritage. It's just telling me, you've already told us how you're related to this person and we agree with you, almost. 12 of them I've been able to take a confirmed button. 38 of them I've had to reject. Some because they've just mixed up people with similar names living hundreds of years ago. Some because I opened this MyHeritage account when a friend's brother invited me to view his family tree, and I've somehow become conflated with my friend's ex-wife in the family tree, and half my hints are based on me having the same parents as my friend's ex-wife. So here's my top match, my first cousin. She is 23 years to the day older than me. As you heard from Claire, first cousins and half aunts and half nephews are both expected to share about 12.5% of their DNA. So you can't distinguish those two relationships purely by looking at the shared DNA. So because of the age gap, MyHeritage has decided that half aunt is the more likely relationship. But when I go in to the match and I scroll down, there's the family tree suggesting that we're first cousins. So the part of the website that's guessing from the DNA and the ages what the relationship might be doesn't even talk to the theories of family relativity part, and it's giving conflicting information. It could do a lot better. And it could hide the rejected ones, and it won't. And there's very little evidence that those hints from Ancestry and MyHeritage are actually using shared DNA. There are some people using artificial intelligence or real intelligence a little better to integrate DNA and family trees. This is one of my favorites, What Are the Odds? It's now become What Are the Odds Plus. It is an excellent website for trying to figure out where on the descendants chart of a particular ancestor some unknown DNA match will fit best. That's how DNA information and family tree information should be integrated. There's another new similar thing, which I haven't really looked at, called Banyan DNA, but I said I'd better mention it. The person behind it has an antipathy to GEDmatch that gets on my nerves for some reason. So, you've used it? Is it good?
So can you repeat the name of it, please?
Banyan DNA, B-A-N-Y-A-N DNA. I've already talked about the problems with FTDNA. The other problem that the DNA websites are very bad at is figuring out whether somebody is still alive. You will see lots of people in your match's family trees called living, or called hidden, or called private. And that just means that the person who put up the family tree has not filled in a date that implies that that individual is dead. I might have shown that our grandchildren died 200 years ago, and it's pretty obvious if my grandchildren died 200 years ago, I'm not standing here talking to you today. Louis Kessler is another great genealogy blogger, and he recently wrote this post about a simple algorithm for excluding living people from family trees. And I hope the big DNA companies read it and implement it. So, bottom line, life is too short and your family tree is too large for it to remain practical to do it all on your own. There's no need to reinvent the wheel. I had an experience looking at one of the Palatine families in Limerick a few years ago where Ancestry had 404 user-donated trees with profiles for the person I was looking for. 404 you're familiar with as the code for a missing page on a website. Might as well have been a Miss 404 missing code as 404 trees to look through to see has anybody got any sources. I said there must be somebody with more than 404, and I thought of Brigham Young, one of the early Mormons when they believed in polygamy. He had dozens of wives and many dozens of children. When I did this talk last week, he appeared in 12,385 trees in Ancestry. That's gone up in a week to 12,405. I really don't want to go through all of those. I'd much rather go. And finally now I'm going to show you a WikiTree profile. Here is Brigham Young's profile on WikiTree, born 1801, died 1877. He's actually my 15th cousin, 4 times removed. And I am 18 degrees from him through marriage connections. He has 221,256 people within 7 degrees of him through marriage connections, which is not surprising when you scroll down and see all his wives. Many of them married to him on the same day or the same week or the same month, and a few more, and then you get his children, and WikiTree currently has 57 of his children. But closer to home, I was asked to help with an intestacy case recently, and this lady was a critical part of it. And I discovered she appeared in 98 trees on Ancestry. And I need to know when she was born. She died on the 23rd of September. I haven't gone through all 98 trees to see how many say she was also born on the 23rd of September and died on her birthday. Somebody may have said, well, we take the date of death and we subtract the age at death, assuming that it is the exact age to the day. That may be where it came from. And I haven't found any primary source for that date. But as I say, I didn't have the patience to go through all 98. And she is on WikiTree with her photograph. And the nice thing on WikiTree is that you can query something. She is said to have been, I edited this to say she is said to have been born on the 23rd, and then there's a citation needed template to try and encourage anybody who does have a primary source for that date of birth to put it in. And WikiTree says 1863, the first one on Ancestry said 1862, so there is already some discrepancy as to the year, let alone the coincidence. The only exception to one profile per person on WikiTree is for adoptees, because they have 2 identities, their birth identity with their birth parents and their adopted identity with their adoptive parents. And there are templates to link the 2 profiles together, and they are allowed to have separate profiles. That's the only way really to manage adoption. I will come back and show you the various buttons on the profile in a minute. How to use it. Well, you sign up. This is why I have 2 windows open. I'm already logged in, so I will flip back to the other window and I will scroll down. And now I'm not signed in the private window. So all you have to give is your first name, your last name at birth, pick a password, an email address. You have to be 16 years or older or have explicit parental permission if you're between 13 and 16. You are not allowed to even create a profile for a child under 13, as I discovered with James down there the other day who wanted to add his grandchildren. You have to be the parent in order to create a profile for an under 13-year-old. And standard form. They're not even looking for your snail mail address or any other unnecessary details. There are essentially 5 levels of membership. Guest accounts have to look at advertisements on every page. Then you can upgrade to a family member account if you want to communicate with other people through the website. Every profile has a button to send a message, and that goes through email, but your email is not revealed until you reply to the person who has contacted you. So at least all the messages go into one searchable central email archive, and you're not wondering, where did I hear that? Which website do I have to look for that message on? Then there is the honor code. There's a link here to the honor code. Once you sign the honor code, you no longer see advertisements, and you are allowed to edit any profile which has open privacy, which is certainly anyone who was born more than 150 years ago or died more than 100 years ago. And many people leave profiles open for more recent ancestors. So my summary at the start stressed some of these points. Make sure you read the honor code. I've never met anybody who disagrees with any of these points. We want to collaborate. We care about accuracy. We assume mistakes are unintentional. We try to be courteous to everyone. We respect privacy, certainly for living people. We respect copyrights. We give credit. Most importantly of all, we cite our sources, and we wish to keep information as free and open as possible. So if you agree with that, sign up and become a wiki genealogist. That allows you to edit profiles for people who have lived since 1700. They're a little stricter. If you want to edit profiles for people before 1700, you have to go through a self-certification process. If you want to edit profiles for people who lived before 1500, there's a stricter certification process. I haven't even done the pre-1500 myself yet. Everyone gets a WikiTree ID. Mine is Waldron201. Waldron is obviously my surname, my last name at birth. That's the name they like you to use for your ID. And I was the 201st Waldron profile when I signed up many years ago. I didn't start using it until many years later. You're greeted by a real human volunteer who will answer your questions. There are beginner sessions on Zoom. The next one is coming up on the 26th of May, where you can log into Zoom and ask your questions. There are regular YouTube live casts around 3 o'clock on a Saturday, so this one isn't starting for another 40 minutes or so, where you pick up lots of information on features that you mightn't otherwise find. I've mentioned the different degrees of privacy. There are a total of 7 privacy levels. Living people who are not members just appear as unlisted. So you can add all your immediate living family members, and if you don't invite them to WikiTree and they don't sign up themselves, they stay as unlisted. Other living people can be private. It will show up in search results, etc. You can be private and have your biography public, but not your family tree public, or the other way around, your family tree public, but not your biography. You can be somewhat private with both of those public. You can be public in that everyone can see the profile, but only those on the trusted list for the profile can edit it. Or you can have an open profile where everyone can see the profile and everyone who has signed the honor code can edit the profile. So most profiles are open. Certainly most profiles of deceased people are open. There's no reason why they shouldn't be. If you find 2 duplicate profiles for the same individual, the profile manager who created the duplicates gets 30 days grace period to sort out the problem, and then anybody can complete the merge if the profile manager doesn't respond within 13 days. You can add your ancestors one by one. You can upload a GEDCOM file, as you might be used to doing with the other DNA websites. But once you upload the GEDCOM file, it goes into a GEDCompare process, which compares everyone in your GEDCOM file with every one of the 36 million people already on WikiTree to try and ensure that you're not creating duplicate profiles. That takes a while to run, and then you have to approve each entry manually, so you may be better off just adding individuals one by one. If you do upload a GEDCOM, you're allowed up to 5,000 people, but make it much smaller. Just take 5 or 6 degrees of your direct ancestors for a start, and that will be 64 or 128 profiles or something. You'll get through those reasonably quickly. I mentioned trusted lists. If you don't want to make a oops, I'm on the wrong one. Go back to the other version where I'm logged in. You can add people by email addresses. I probably shouldn't even display these email addresses. They're the people who are allowed to edit my profile, and I can just add somebody new to the trusted list by keying in the email address, or if I'm already managing their profile, I can tick that there. So that allows a small group of people to collaborate on the profile of somebody who lived recently, whereas everybody collaborates on the profiles of people who lived further back. So I'm nearly out of time, and I finally got on to what the topic is supposed to be about: DNA features. You can link a DNA kit to the profile of an active member or of a deceased individual. If you want your DNA kit linked to your WikiTree profile, you have to sign up as a member first. You can't link your brothers or your sisters unless they have signed up as members. And that's how WikiTree knows they're authorized to show the information. And it occurred to me as I put this together, I was thinking of our dear friend Rose McCutcheon, who many of you will have known. This weekend last year, I was at Rose's memorial service in Bandon with Nora Keohane-Hickey, who died subsequently, who was mentioned this morning. And I said to myself, let's hope Rose's great work over many decades in this society and for genealogy lasts. And I have just recently added her to WikiTree, and I'll show you that with the permission of her sister.
Paddy, we're back in track time, guys, so give yourself another 20 minutes.
Okay, good. How do you add your DNA kits? There is the link to my DNA tests. On the top right-hand corner, you have several drop-down menus. There's one with the WikiTree ID of the person that you're looking at. And on that, there is a DNA tab. And that opens up this page, and then you click DNA tests, and you click over there to add a new test. So I've told it that I'm on 23andMe, I'm on Ancestry DNA, I've done Family Tree DNA Family Finder, I've done Family Tree DNA Mitochondrial, I've done Family Tree Y, I've done Living DNA, I've done MyHeritage DNA. I've already added them all. Very easy to add the details. And one of the prompts is to add your GEDmatch ID. I have a combined GEDmatch ID because I've spat for Ancestry, I've spat for 23andMe, I have swabbed for Family Tree DNA. Each of those three companies looks at different locations on the chromosomes. So I have combined the data from all three into a super kit, which is a tier 1 tool on GEDmatch, and that will give you more accurate matching. GDPR is the reason why WikiTree discourages adding profiles for living individuals unless you invite them to join WikiTree. Its policy recently is that if they don't accept the invitation within 30 days, the profile gets anonymized again. And the same reason why they don't like you linking other people's DNA to their WikiTree profiles without their explicit consent. So make sure you persuade your DNA matches to register, to link their DNA kits. And if they add at least one generation of open profiles for deceased ancestors, somebody else can do the rest of the work for them. That's all they absolutely have to do. So let's look at my profile for a start. Just tells you I'm an honor code signatory. I've made 7,000 contributions. I've got so many thank yous. I have 447 people within 7 degrees by blood or marriage of me. Got all the lists of my DNA tests. There is a forum, they call it G2G, genealogist to genealogist, with various tags, which one follows. They're the surnames I've been most active in. There's my badges for things that I have done. I can say I'm Waldron, also known as de Waldreha. You can put in as many variant spellings of both first names and surnames as you like. It's a worldwide site, so you can put it in Australian or Osperlum or Smolat. And I have no descendants. It asked me, have I got a spouse? Not yet. there's a button that shows 5 generations of my ancestors. You can upload photographs for everyone. I know everyone on my first 5 generations, except Claire mentioned we all have a mitochondrial end-of-line ancestor called Mary Unknown. You can put in unknown as last name at birth as necessary. Mitochondrial DNA hasn't helped me to find her last name at birth. If that's not enough generations, on this menu up here, there's a link to the compact tree. That's the one that's linked to from GEDmatch as well, which gives you the Ann and Tattle numbers to try and help you keep track of the generations. And you can see a few more of my ancestors on the compact version. And then I have a biography, mentions in the forum, and over here my DNA connections. They appear on my profile, but they also propagate through the tree to everyone who shares my Y-DNA, if I've done a Y-DNA test and added it, to everyone who shares my mitochondrial DNA, if I've done a mitochondrial test and added it, to everyone in my, what did you say earlier, the Derb Finna, was it that within the third cousins or close to the people who are guaranteed to share autosomal DNA with me. We'll see the percentage of autosomal DNA and the percentage of xDNA that they are expected to share with me. To actually do the comparison, you just click the compare button and select. Well, I should go to somebody else's profile before I do that, because that's just going to compare me with myself, which is very helpful. That's not the right profile to do that on. And there are all the other cousins, some living, one deceased, who I have persuaded to sign up and add their DNA test. So you can tell 12.5% they're first cousins, 1.56% is half second cousin, 0.78% is a third cousin, but in this case 0.78% is a second cousin twice removed, the last of my grandmother's generation, who was born when her father was 69 and who I persuaded to swab for me in her later years, who since sadly died. And you can have photographs, and you can have DNA confirmation statements as well, which I haven't done as many of as I should. And if I go in to edit my profile, there's an edit tab here, which you will not see if you look at my profile, because I am private with public biography and family tree. So that means only the people on my trusted list can edit. And when I edit, I can say over here, are my parents non-biological? You can put in adopted relationships, as I said. Is my father uncertain? Is my father confident? Is my father confirmed with DNA? My mother is also confirmed with DNA, but I haven't done the confirmation statements yet, so you're not supposed to tick that box until you have put the confirmation statement in the sources section. It does have this obsession with middle names. I have 4 names, Patrick, Joseph, Martin, Waldron, so I don't have a middle name. And if I put Joseph Martin in middle name, it will abbreviate to Patrick J and ignore the Martin bit. So I put everything in the proper first name field. You can see I put in the Waldraha. The woman is married twice. Present husband's name can go under current last name if she's adopted it, last name at birthdays, and the first husband's or any previous husband's names can go in other last names, other nicknames. If I was also known as Pat or Packy or Sonny or something else, that could go in there. And I've revealed my birthday, which I shouldn't have done, and my email address, so I shouldn't really show that. Anyway, let's go back to somebody who lived a long time ago. Brian Boru, first High King of Ireland, was he? Whatever he was anyway. The High King of Ireland, who died at the Battle of Clontarf in 1014, who was the grandfather of the first people who took the surname O'Brien. He is a pre-1500 profile, so I'm not allowed to edit him. He is my 26th great-grandfather. I'm sure he's the 26th or 27th or 28th great-grandfather of everyone in the room, if only we had the records to prove it, because you just have to count 2 parents, 4 grandparents, 8 great-grandparents, 1,000 ancestors, 10 generations back, 1,000,000, 20 generations back, 1,000,000,000, 30 generations back in Brian Boru's day. And he has an interesting DNA connection. Again, somebody sadly that we lost last year, Conor Miles John O'Brien, Lord Inchiquin, who was very enthusiastic about genetic genealogy, even though he had so much to lose, having a 28 generation pedigree all the way back to Brian Boru. He was FTDNA Ket 29355, one of the very early adopters. He came to a lot of the Genetic Genealogy Ireland and Clans of Ireland events, and was involved in O'Brien surname projects, O'Brien DNA project at FTDNA. So I got permission to. He was already on Wikitree as a notable and as a member of the aristocracy. So I got permission from the O'Brien project to add his DNA test, which I could do because he has died. And his most recent confirmed Y-DNA SNP is FGC 13418, and that appears on his, how many grandfathers profile, Brian Boru's profile. That does not mean that Brian Boru had that mutation. We're pretty sure that mutation occurred somewhere in the 28 generations between Brian Boru and Conor. But at least it tells us the branch of the tree of mankind that we should look at. If we want to see exactly how Conor is related to Brian, that little green icon brings up the relationship finder, and it confirms that Conor is the 28th great-grandson of Brian. And some of the relationships, confidence thing hasn't been selected, some have been marked confident. And if we find somebody else descended from Brian Boru, we can start adding DNA confirmations on some of those back along. So that's the O'Briens. Sarsfield is another wonderful story. I'm going to go on beyond my 20 minutes now, if somebody doesn't shut me up. Patrick Sarsfield is still famous around Limerick for his role in the Siege of Limerick in the Jacobite-Williamite Wars in the late 1600s. He fled to France with the wild geese. He joined up with the French forces. He was wounded in battle in 1693, and he is buried in a place called Huy near Liège in Belgium. And like Guillaume, the honorary French consul in Limerick and head of French in Mary Immaculate College, has started a research project, probably inspired by the Richard III story in England, to find Sarsfield's grave in Huy, to exhume him and to bring him back and rebury him in Limerick. So we know he was a very tall man for his time. Loic has done tremendous work in archives in Ireland and Belgium and thinks he has pinpointed the burial spot. He has a team of archaeologists recruited to do a dig this summer. But if they do find a skeleton, they will want DNA confirmation. 1655 is kind of beyond the reach of autosomal DNA comparison, but it's well within the reach of Y-DNA and mitochondrial DNA comparison. So if you want to read about the project, if you want to contribute to it, there's a GoFundMe page. They've collected over 40,000. They want to get up to 95,000. There's an article from the Irish Examiner with all the details of the dig. I'm not going to go into them now. There is a Sarsfield project on family tree DNA, which has been playing up, so that you have to reload the page to get it to come up. There is just 7 members of the Sarsfield homecoming page, and just 3 of those have public Y-DNA results. This is the so-called colorized chart, but because they haven't been grouped, they're not colorized, and they have hidden the surname column and the most distant patrilineal ancestor column. I'll show you in a minute what they should look like. 2 of them are from haplogroup E, and that's where we expect to find the remains in Huy, whereas another one is in haplogroup OR, which shows there are definitely 2 distinct genetic origins of Sarsfield in Ireland. I'm pretty sure all 3 of those are Sarsfield males, even though it doesn't display it. But how are we going to find people who share Sarsfield's mitochondrial DNA? Well, Wikitree has a DNA descendants feature which allows you to highlight mitochondrial descendants. This is Sarsfield's most distant known matrilineal ancestor, a Welsh lady, Helen William Buckley, excuse my Welsh, and these are all her descendants who would have shared her mitochondrial DNA. And it shows only 10 generations, but we don't have 10 generations yet. And in fact, as we scroll down, the Sarsfields are on the furthest generation to the right. So there's a lot of work to be done. I was asked, would I like to trace all Sarsfield's mitochondrial relations? I said, there are going to be millions. Why don't we wait until we find the DNA, family tree DNA, analyzes it, gives us a list of matches, and then we trace the matches back rather than tracing everyone else forward. And for Martin's benefit, he did have a sister, Anne Sarsfield, who married Edward Cheevers, the first Viscount Mount Leinster of Killian, down the road from Mount Bellew. Am I right? Killian. But they don't seem to have had any children. But if you can find any female line descendants down around East Galway, let us know, please. And I did spot another error. Anne Sarsfield. There's 2 spouses. There are 2 copies currently of Patrick Sarsfield on Wikitree. I have proposed the merge. It's going through the 30-day grace period. And if you do read up on the history of Patrick Sarsfield, there are conflicting accounts of who his parents and grandparents were, and those 2 Patricks actually have different parents. So there's a little bit of research to be done to make sure that Wikitree is corrected. But it can be done, and it can be corrected. I mentioned Roz. Her sister Claire kindly encouraged me, and her good friend Jill Williams, who many of you will know, to put her on Wikitree. And this just worked because I added her DNA tests yesterday morning, and they are processed every 24 hours or so. So I was very relieved when I got in here this morning and found that they're up and running. And it just shows her mitochondrial DNA, but there is another McCutcheon on Wikitree who is from the same male line. So if I invite Rose's brother, Will, his distant cousin, will appear in his matches. And Will is what relation to Rose's father? 3rd cousin twice removed, so 4th cousin once removed to Rose. And I did mark the last generation uncertain because I didn't have a primary source to hand when I connected them up yesterday. I'm sure there is somewhere in Rose's great work there will be a primary source to connect them, because I did cite an email from Rose to me that gave me the details. And Kathleen here in the front has come all the way from Prince Edward Island to this talk and to see another famous man who's in Dublin tomorrow night. You've probably never heard of Richard McNicholas from County Mayo, but he was mentioned in, if I scroll down to my sources, what newspaper was that in? The Independent, in an article some time ago, as the grandfather of a man who's been on a tour of Ireland this week, Bruce Springsteen. So we would love to bring Bruce to Kilshimott to visit his ancestral home, but he's too busy playing to packed houses in more densely populated areas. Wikitree and GEDmatch, I've already shown you how to set up the link. If you're managing DNA for somebody who has died, there is a post from the forum explaining what you do. You basically click on the DNA tab on the deceased person. If you click on it in a living person, it doesn't give you the option to add the DNA kits except for yourself. But for deceased people, it gives you that option. You may have to go over to G2G to read how to get GEDmatch to show the link back to Wikitree. There is a setting, enable if no alias, and enable if alias on GEDmatch to take all the details there. 23andMe. I'm amazed at how few people add links on 23andMe to their family trees on other websites. There's the page with a share a link to your online family tree, and it supports links to MyHeritage, Ancestry, Find My Past, Family Search, genealogyonline.nl, Genie, Wikitree, and even to RootsWeb, which Ancestry is trying to close down at the moment. So all you do is you paste in the URL of your pedigree chart, That's the URL for the compact chart that I showed you earlier with your user ID rather than Waldron 201 in there. I haven't actually found any of my 1523 and me matches with a link back to Wikitree, and there doesn't seem to be any way to search for them. I said I wouldn't have time to talk about Mito-Y DNA. Better say a little bit about one name studies. I have set one up for Cahir on Wikitree. This was a client who's become a good friend of mine since, desperate to find out where did the Cahir surname originate. And there's lots of sections page. This is a free space page where you can document anything else that you want with links back and forth to pedigree charts. And I think the interesting bit maybe is I have put in a link to Cahirs on Wikitree. When I last looked on St. Patrick's Day, there were 31 end-of-line things. This is one of the more advanced things. This is Wikitree Plus. And I can tell it's show me people whose last name at birth was Cahir and who have no father on Wikitree. And I click the get profiles. And there it gives me the list of all the end-of-line ancestors. They're the number of different lineages of Cahirs on Wikitree that I want to try and connect up together. And I am the manager of the OD project on Family Tree DNA, co-manager with James, who's down there in the middle of the room. And we have a colorized chart just to show you what the Sarsfield one might have looked like, where we do include the surnames, we do include the most distant known ancestor. And in an ideal world, this would be a set of links back to the Wikitree profiles of the most distant known ancestors. There is a Wikitree project at Family Tree DNA, and I was surprised to find how few people, I searched that for Wikitree, it finds 18 matches where people have actually put in the Wikitree link or the Wikitree ID of the most distant known ancestor, but it's not an active link. You have to manually put it into another tab. And that, I think, would be a great way to integrate a surname project on Wikitree with a surname project on a DNA website. So I'm way over time. There is a long link of all the other features on Wikitree that you will find interesting, a link to all the help pages, my interview when I was the member of the week, a Facebook post which prompted at least one or two people here to sign up on Wikitree, plenty of future reading and experiments for you. But I hope I have convinced you that it can be done better than the big DNA companies are doing it, and this might be the right way to go about it. So happy to answer any questions. Thank you.